We're going to call to order the regular meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. It's August the 8th. We have a quorum, Mr. Weezar, Mr. Englander, Mr. Koretz, myself, Bernard Parks, as chair. Colleagues, most of the items 5 through 9 are very quick and appear to be somewhat simple. If we can ask that we go through those first, and then we can clear the room and do closed session 1 through 4.
Item number 5 is the City Administrative Officer report relative to the 2011-12 Appropriation Limit.
On this item, could you just kind of give us a brief reminder of what and why we do this, and get an understanding of what the criteria that you use to create the allocation?
Yes, sir. Before you use the CAO report on the 2011-12 Appropriation Limit, or otherwise called the GAN limit. The GAN limit is essentially a cap on the amount of revenue the city may appropriate or spend. The state constitution requires the city to establish its limit each fiscal year. This is based on population and per capita income factors provided by the State Department of Finance. The city's 2011-12 limit is approximately $4.39 billion. Of this total city revenue of $6.9 billion, those that are defined as revenue derived from taxes minus exclusions is $3.25 billion. This is the city's appropriations subject to the limit. Thus, the city is about $1.14 billion below the limit. There are exemptions that include federal mandates such as payroll taxes, consent decree, debt service on general obligation bonds, and capital expenditures. In essence, there's a base budget year which was established in 1978-79. Every year, this is increased by the per capita income factors and the population growth. And we're comparing our revenue versus that limit, and we are below that limit by $1.14 billion.
Let me just ask, on the numbers that you gave us for the reduction in population, is that from the recent census? Is that another?
So this is provided by the State Department of Finance based on its economic and demographic research for each city that it publishes every May 1st.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move that item. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 6 is the motion Kokori and Koretz relative to requesting report backs and adopting policies in regards to the Neighborhood Council funding program, including the use of budget and reconciliation templates, a prescribed accounting system, rollover of funds, equipment purchases, development of an electronic system for the neighborhood funding program, and related matters. Education and Neighborhood Committee recommended to adopt the motion on July 27, 2011.
Okay. Do we have someone here from Dunn? No one from Dunn? The CAO?
CAO's office.
Okay. Why don't you have a seat there? Mr. McQuiston, you want to speak on this? Why don't you come? What if we won't let you wait?
Mr. Chairman, Terry Sauer with the CAO staff. This item was considered in Education and Neighborhoods Committee. It's one of 4 motions that were introduced by Mr. Krikorian and Mr. Koretz to address a variety of issues with Dunn. This particular one instructed the department to develop a series of templates for budgeting and also for the reconciliation of the funding program. Dunn is working with the Controller's Office and working to develop a series of templates that can be used by all neighborhood councils to facilitate the tracking of expenditures. The other issue that had come up, and we've discussed it in the past, is the issue as it relates to the potential cash shortfall in the Dunn Fund. The Controller has advised us that with the reconciliation, or where we are now, we appear to have eliminated that problem. And we are continuing to work with Dunn and the Controller as this item moves forward to Council, so that there'll be sort of consistent reporting mechanisms for all the neighborhood councils.
This motion has come out of the one-year process that Mr. Krikorian's been involved with.
Yes, that is correct, sir.
Now, what's the status of the other motions? Are they coming through the system?
So they are coming through the system. One has to do with the definition of the factual basis stakeholder. The other two have to do with a more regional approach to the neighborhood council governance structure. But this is the only one that I believe that's been referred to this committee. But those were also approved by the committee at its last regular meeting and are being forwarded to council for consideration and approval.
And there's no assessment at this time of what you believe with all these recommendations could be an impact on the general fund?
Mr. Chairman, in terms of the others, those are more of a governance issue, particularly the regional issue, and it's too early to tell, if any, impact that would have on the general fund. This will have a very direct impact because it should allow for greater transparency, greater ability to track neighborhood council expenditures, and deal with, in some cases, facilitate the processing of expenditures from the funding program. And that probably is going to have not an impact on the general fund in terms of cost, but an impact on the general fund in terms of our ability to track and see what's actually spent.
Just had a couple questions, and some of them had to do with the general fund, so thanks for answering that as well. On the recommendation for the system that they're going to be using, it looks like it's going to be coming out of Dunn rather than the controller or the CAO.
We're working with the department. We've actually, our office is reaching out to ITA and the controller to see what within the existing structures could accommodate this system without. Dunn would probably be paying for it from its contractual services account, but those discussions are still in a very preliminary stage. With the transition to FMIS, the new FMS system, adding new things, we have to kind of move slowly and judiciously, so we are having those discussions.
Okay, so there may be a possibility that we can plug something into the system that...
I am not an expert in that area, but okay. We are having those
More to
discussions.
Come on that. And then my only other question was on the prohibition of the rollover of unincumbent funds. I know that there are some neighborhood councils that identify large capital projects, and if they encumber certain funds or are working towards acquiring property or whatever, a major capital expenditure, whatever that might be, is there a way to identify that as one question, or perhaps, and it's got the prohibition language, and I know this is really the Budget and Finance Committee, but since I'm not on the other committee, I'll ask it here. If there's a way to allow the mayor, perhaps as every other department, to identify those opportunities where those are not prohibited from being rolled over?
Well, there are actually two separate things going on here. One was there was a policy of just rolling over whatever money was set aside for a 3-year period and allowing neighborhood councils to continue to collect those funds, and up to 3 years, and it was at one point up to $150,000. The adopted budget has eliminated or suspended the rollover. What neighborhood councils can do is work through the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment, and at the end of the fiscal year, there is a process for encumbering funds, and encumbering in the city speak, meaning you've taken a board action, done completes the requisite paperwork, and then the controller deducts that, or it's tied up within FMS, and there is a process in place. Dunn's still working out how, what kind of documentation, but typically it would be for a board action.
Allow it. Okay.
Yeah, for but there is a mechanism within the current city accounting system, and that's really separate and apart from the issues with the rollover policy.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Weezer?
No questions. I'm just curious because in my particular case, all of my neighborhood councils have contacted me starting on Friday, and they're all against any action being taken today. And what they have claimed is that the outreach with them wasn't sufficient enough, and they have lots of thoughts, lots of opinions, lots of insights. Some of them actually have some historic problems that we don't need to go into here. Is there a time certain on this, Mr. Chair,
Well,
to
I
move
talked to
this?
Mr. Krikorian, maybe a member of his staff is here.
Because ideally, what they're asking is frankly, since some have gone away and this and that, could we bring this back after recess so that they could get a healthy interaction with the process?
Mr. Rosendahl, this item was actually held, there were 2 hearings held in committee.
Yeah.
This really is directing them to go forward with additional work. The rollover has already been suspended.
Okay, so this would be more report back so they get a chance to visit this issue?
Yes, it's my understanding that that's what the process would
When I
involve.
talked with him today, he, and talked about if we held it up, that means the work doesn't start. But he
That
wants
is
the work
correct.
to start. The issue is, he would like it to be configuration of what the motion says and get the report backs where people will then have the ability to discuss and bring different insights once the work is done. If we don't get the work done, then the motion will just get pushed and pulled and back and forth. And he said also, they have been working on this for a year, and they've given every neighborhood council the ability to be there, show up, give their input, and it's not been done in a secret. They've said they've gone to great lengths. Maybe you can comment from Mr.
We
Purport.
had 3 hearings.
Give your name.
Emily Maya, the Office of Councilmember Krikorian. We had 3 hearings of education and neighborhood. We posted the agendas a week in advance, more than the 72 hours required. There was very little attendance to the meetings. We also, our office met with neighborhood council members individually who requested information about the motions. We also met with a few of the commissioners from Bonk. So we have attempted to really put the information out there and hear anybody who had any concerns about it, but we didn't receive very many responses.
And I think the issue of the rollover, we dealt with a portion of that during the budget,
That is correct.
and so that's another thing.
Has it been taken before your commission?
I don't believe that Bonk had a hearing, but we did meet with the commissioners to go over the 4 motions. This is one of 4 motions, and we went over all 4 of the motions with
And did
them.
they vote on it, or take a position, or have a discussion? How did they interact with it?
The commissioners came to our office and met with us. I don't believe they had
A commission
agendized
public
hearing.
meeting on it? Why not? Why
Not
not
that I
do
know. I
that?
can't speak for the commission. We did have 3 committee meetings, though.
Is Bong here? You're Bong?
No, I'm with the CAO.
Oh, is there anybody from that outfit? BH here, or any of his people?
No, I don't believe they're
Why
here.
aren't they here?
I
Got
can't-
them.
I can't speak to that, Mr. Rosendahl.
Well, one would hope that they could be here and help us think it through a little bit, so they get paid for it.
We did advise them of the committee meeting and the agenda item.
Were they present at the E&N committee?
Yes, they were.
And I think that committee basically supported the motion as written.
Yes, that is correct.
So by action taken today, Mr. Chair, what does it mean?
Basically, we're asking the city attorney, the controller, and ITA to report to the council on 4 different issues. And we're also, on the motion proposes to adopt some policies which will come back. Once those policies are completed, they'll come back for further review and approval. That's my understanding.
Does that mean that we're looking at something going before full council, before recess, that locks things in any way, shape, or form, or does
The only
it give
thing it
my...
locks in is that we're asking them to report on one instance 90 days, on 3 items, 180 days on a couple of items. So it locked in them being directed to go to produce some work. But once these things are produced, they come back through the committee process.
And allows us then to take action in a substantive sense.
Well, yeah, you
This
then
is
have
more
to approve.
procedural to do our homework.
Well, is to get the work done. If we don't, one of the dilemmas we have, in several departments will not work unless the council has approved the
Correct.
motion.
Yeah.
So. this is
Okay,
gonna
I just
happen.
want to go on record that my neighborhood councils have come out about wanting to participate, and if this is clear, that this is a step that then comes back and that they then can participate, I'm fine with it.
Mr. Krikorian told me also that he's more than willing to meet with whomever may be in dissent while they're working on this to get their input.
Yes, we'd be happy to meet with any of your neighborhood council members.
But this is just to get the work done. All of these items come back.
All these items come back, so there's no policy decisions made by us at this point.
No, other than asking to create the policies.
Sure.
Yeah.
Create it, but it gives the
not-
flexibility. The last thing I need is for these folks to say, you've made a decision and we didn't give our input. And that's the only thing I'm totally process-oriented, and I got a group that involve themselves, as everybody knows, in all of these kinds of
It
things.
appears everything in the motion is within 90 to 180 days.
Yeah, just to follow up on Mr. Rosenthal's comments, it sounds like we made this information accessible, but it doesn't sound like we did outreach to the neighborhood councils to make sure they were aware of it. Did we do any outreach? Did we do emails or mailings to all the neighborhood council chairs or neighborhood councils to be sure they were aware that this was going on and to ask for their input?
Paul Smith at CLA. The chair and the committee held several meetings relative to these motions. They had a number of outreach sessions with the public about the nature of these recommendations and policy reaffirmations. So I think for the committee's part, there was an attempt to be very due diligent about outreaching to the communities about the intent of these motions.
But did we actually do outreach to make sure they were aware of it? So could a neighborhood council never have been aware that this all was going on?
From my attendance, there were folks who were there who knew of these things, and they were vocal about their participation and their recommendations. Whether or not the outreach was sufficient enough to reach everybody, I can't speak to that.
Yeah, I think at a minimum, we'd want to direct that outreach was done to every neighborhood council to be sure that they were aware of this issue. I think we might have gotten better participation if we had done that. It sounds like some folks are probably monitoring things better, and once they were aware, gave it their input, but it sounds like not that many participated.
Councilman, the preceding this, there was a number of opportunities for the community to express how they wanted to see changes made in the bonk process, the Dunn process, the NC process. And I think what you're seeing before you is the cumulative recommendations from those outreach programs. They spent a lot of time, the council spent a lot of time surveying, having outreach sessions within the districts. This is not coming in a vacuum. It came out of a number of steps that they took prior to introducing these motions.
Yeah, again, I would suggest that whatever we do to move this forward, that we make sure that every neighborhood council is contacted and made aware of where everything stands and before we move forward with it.
I think the general manager's here. He can probably tell you what they did on their part.
Bangwan Kim, General Manager for the Department of Neighborhood Empowerment. Good afternoon, committee members. I apologize for being tardy, but there's a terrible traffic mess downtown.
No.
Outside of Mocha. But as part of our report back, I fully intend to go around to all the neighborhood councils throughout the city for their feedback on this particular motion, as well as the other motions that the councilman has introduced. There's a lot of interest in the motions, and there's a lot of recognition that the funding program needs improvement. So the neighborhood councils are very much aware of this motion, and I fully intend to delve into a very robust public participation process as part of our report back to council and committee.
Good. And what are we doing to try to eliminate some of the red tape that currently exists within Dunn when processing neighborhood councils' paperwork and funding requests?
Well, we've been going through several iterations of re-engineering the workflow for demand warrants. As you know, Councilman, we're not alone in terms of the way that we approve demand warrants. We need the approval of CAO and controller on a number of issues, and it's a very difficult system to engineer appropriately because you have almost two competing end user needs. You have ease of use needs of neighborhood council volunteers, half of whom have never managed public funds before. And on the other hand, you have very stringent regulations governing the use of public funds. So we've done as much, and we will continue to do, re-engineering of our internal workflow to make sure that demand warrants are being tracked and they're being processed in a timely manner. The ones that are problematic are going to be put aside. I'm monitoring those myself. But in the end, there's going to be no better solution than developing an electronic platform for the Neighborhood Council funding program. And I'm very much hoping that I get the support of the mayor and council in trying to get the city's ITA resource to help us design something that could be a module that extends off of the city's current revamped financial management system. If we could develop something that neighborhood councils could use as a bookkeeping system that automatically ties into the city's FMS system, that would be the surest way to maintain transparency as well as the processing of all the check requests.
Yeah, that sounds great. I certainly look forward to seeing that.
So do I.
Thank you.
I'm glad you're here. I just wanted to, you know my district.
More than, yes.
As I do.
I am familiar with every one of your districts.
I
yes.
have 8 neighborhood councils. They have gotten pretty concerned this weekend, emailing me, calling me, that there wasn't sufficient outreach done with them for them to feel comfortable enough about this motion going to council. Could you help me with that?
Well, the council office, Councilman Krikorian has actually spent extensive amount of time getting feedback from neighborhood councils. They've held at least 2 town hall meetings. They've conducted online surveys, and Education Neighborhoods has held at least devoted 2 full meetings to these particular motions, including the funding program. So on the city's side, I think we provided as many opportunities for neighborhood councils to participate. What some of your neighborhood councils may not be aware of is that this is just the beginning of the process. That, as I mentioned before, that the department will start conducting a series of regional workshops where we take the motion and we ask for their feedback. So this is not the end of the process, but this is the beginning.
And why are they so anxious?
I could only
one in
conjecture.
particular has given like 6 issues that need to be addressed that weren't addressed. Another one says this hadn't happened and that had, I mean, I'm just listening to them at the same time, trying to figure out how to give them their platform, and at the same time, as Mr. Parks was saying, it's just the beginning. It's got to come back and forth, so we're not making any really policy decisions.
Correct. I will go out to the neighborhood councils to correct correct any misunderstandings that they may have about this agenda being placed before this committee's agenda. I think they may not be aware that this motion, although it was vetted through Education Neighborhoods, also needs to be vetted through the Budget and Finance Committee. So there may be some misunderstandings in terms of the city council process, but I will go back to the neighborhood councils that express concerns and repeat to them what I'm stating to you now.
Which is, again?
Which is that this is the beginning of the process, that we basically have a 3-month report back period. And during this 3 months, I'm going to conduct workshops in every region of the city. We will do extensive outreach, and we will spend in each region at least 1 full day vetting this particular motion as well as the additional motions that Councilman Krikorian has championed.
Can we get this out on one of these social media so I can get that message to all of them today? Could you help and assist and work with my office so we can get something out?
I'd be more than happy to.
One thing that we've determined, I just thought about it on this item, I think this started in budget year 10-11, because that was where we cut funds, and then Mr. Krikorian came in with a different proposal that we gave a timeline. So this has been almost a 2-budget year process, and then he's held a number of committee meetings. The thing that I've heard from people, not necessarily my district, is the fact that they have not maybe agreed with the motion is part of their confusion as to whether they've had what they figure access to their input. They've had input. They that they just disagree with maybe some of the positions. And so I think that is a clarity as to one thing of having input and having access is different than saying your particular opinion has been adopted. So I think that's one of the issues. The only thing, if we can, as a committee, move forward in concurring with education in neighborhoods committee recommendations and move forward with these stated deadlines, 90 to 180 days, we can get the work done in that process and believe that the DUN will have the ability to meet with the different concerned people as they develop the policies that are coming forth. I would just ask the CAO one thing, as you move forward and look at, as we evaluate the impact on the general fund, that we do our best to keep whatever our new funds are dollars, if we have the ability to keep it within the DUN and the budgets of the neighborhood councils as opposed to looking at the general fund as the subsidy.
No problem.
Yes.
I agree.
So we'll move that with that
But
one.
I'm going to vote no on it.
Okay. We'll move that. Let me go with Mr. Corrett.
That's fine.
Okay. So we have a 4-to-1 vote on adopting or concurring with the ENN committee report with that one instruction to the CAO to be mindful of the impact on the general fund.
Yes, sir.
All right. Next item.
Next item is item number 7.
I'm sorry, Mr. Quiston, you have a call.
Yes, Jim McQuiston. As you know, I was one of the early neighborhood council people back in the elected charter commission. And I'm a booster of neighborhood councils if they're independent of the city and not tied to the city. As far as the funding is concerned, this way more or less puts them in really as a department of the city, and what we really want is a contractor arrangement. In other words, they should have some kind of a request for quotation from the neighborhood councils and go through the regular funding routine that we already have. And we already have a system like that. And then they're more or less treated as independent contractors, which is really their main function. We used to have, in Mayor Hahn's time, we had a system called Teamwork LA. And I've been after Larry to reinstitute that. When the present mayor came in, he stopped it. That was extremely effective, and it made the volunteers a big asset to the city. Not sitting around and making speeches and whatnot, but actually going out and finding out what was necessary in the neighborhood, and it was practically automatic that it got done. And I think that this Budget and Finance Committee might want to think about that too, getting Larry to reinstitute Teamwork LA. And I have already sent in a message to Larry to remind him that he promised that they would get it back in a month or two, and that was 8 years ago.
All right.
Thank you, Jim.
You listened very intently then.
It's a city month.
Okay, we'll move that item. The next item.
Item number 7 is the adopted budget recommendation relative to instructing the city administrative officer to report regarding potential options for the library department and the Department of Recreation and Parks to pay their early retirement incentive program ERIP obligations over a 3-year period.
Let me just ask, from my standpoint, and I think for Mr. Garcia, we'd just like a very short report. We understand the impact on the budget, but we'd like to know what that impact is. This is not an action item to change anything in the budget, just would like to know what the dollars, if you spread it over a 3-year period. But not, just a very brief report would satisfy.
Okay.
This is just to ask them to come back to report.
Yes, sir. Just a report back. Okay. Any other issues? Okay, we'll move that with a instruction to just a brief report back on that motion. Next item.
Next item is item number 8, adopted budget recommendation relative to instructing the city administrative officer and the chief legislative analyst to report with recommendations for revising the city's financial policies for 2012-13, to redefine the definition of contributions for capital or infrastructure improvements, to appropriately include in that annual calculation all tangible expenditures that are eligible for MICLA financing, including but not limited to expenditures on capital repair, infrastructure, and technology.
You're going to handle this one also?
Excuse me?
You're going to handle this one also?
Well, just to let you know, we have in the CAO formed a team, group team, to start reviewing this recommendation from the budget. So it's going to include our debt group, our finance team, our capital expenditure team, and our public works team.
I think where this started, Mr. Smith had a motion several years ago to create the 1%, and we couldn't quite ever reach it, but then we realized over time that if we're using MICLA, we're using general fund debt service to pay for it, and yet we're not taking credit for it. We're fixing sidewalks, and a variety of things are being done on general infrastructure, but we were limited in the definition of specifically the general fund, and so we're looking to be able to evaluate just a broader sense of what we're dealing with on capital and infrastructure. So that was, I think, the intent of that budget issue.
And if we could, when you come back on that, break out the technology components, because I think we've categorized technology incorrectly over the years, and by the time we actually go out and purchase hardware and infrastructure for technology, it's already outdated or antiquated. So I'd like to get some definitions on what we consider technology in the form of MICLA financing.
Okay.
Jose?
No questions.
No? Paul? Okay. With those instructions, we'll move item 8.
Item 9 is the adopted budget recommendation relative to requesting reports from the city administrative officer and the zoo department on eliminating the remaining 26% of the zoo department's budget that is still reliant on the general fund.
Let me just ask, let me ask the CLA, is this going to be on Revenue Day, dealing with the zoo and the potential partnerships?
What we can do is add this to the list of various revenue options. We'll be presenting a matrix, and so we can include this. The council file itself wouldn't necessarily, unless, I don't think it's on the agenda yet.
Because I thought it was going to be part of the package dealing with convention center and as options.
Right, we'll have it in an options sheet, but the actual council items themselves probably won't be on there for action themselves, but we can prepare it in a context where you can have a general discussion about it.
Okay. And then let me ask for the CAO, where is what does the file on 110993, what does that cover? Is that the one that the Arts and Parks dealt with recently about a proposal of how to manage the zoo?
That is correct, sir. And that will be, actually, I believe that's scheduled to be considered by the council on Friday.
On Friday this week?
Yeah, I was advised by the clerk, but I don't have an agenda item number yet.
Did that issue address the general fund impact?
Tangentially, it addresses the general fund impact. What would be before you on that Friday is a recommendation to proceed with the issuance of the RFP. We discussed the potential impact on the general fund but not specifically, because some of that would be part of whatever, if the item is approved and if we were to go out to RFP, the response, and if the decision was made to proceed, that would be, the general fund contribution would be part of the negotiations. So we speak to it, but not
direct
in that level of detail.
Okay.
No.
Paul?
Yeah, so we're talking about releasing the RFP and getting a report back on an internal alternative management structure.
They're actually, the CAO report or the committee report from Arts Parks recommends moving forward with the RFP. but it also includes a motion that was introduced by Mr. Wesson to concurrently consider other management structures and come back with a report back on what those might look like at the same time as we return with any recommendations relative to the results of the request for proposal process.
Now, I know sometimes that process can be expensive, especially if we decide not to go forward with it. I wonder if it would make more sense to get the report first and then go forward with the RFP, rather than just having a false start and deciding that the alternative report made it not make sense.
That would be a discussion for the council. The committee adopted a concurrent proposal. So again, we can work with the council in whatever way it directs us to.
Well, could we have a substitute motion that we not release the RFP, but we wait until we've heard the alternative management structure report?
I think that's got to be done at council.
I think that's
not
gotta be
before
done.
us today.
No, and the RFP itself, the report that came from Arts Parks Committee will be in council on Friday, and that would be the opportunity to have that discussion.
Okay, well, I think that would make more sense from a fiscal perspective, so we don't go through the expense and effort and staff time of releasing an RFP, and then once we've gotten the report, finding the alternative structure might be more usable.
Okay, especially, and I'm going to write off of Mr. Corretz on that, especially if the alternative structure could handle that $20 million budget gap that we're looking at, or the cost of it. Can I ask the zoo guy to come on up for a quick second on this one? There's some discussion going on about two ways to deal with the zoo, okay? One is to put out an RFP and see who would partner with us for revenue streams and work with us. And I know as we go forward with our tough budget crisis, public-private partnerships are potentially the solutions to some of our problems. And so an RFP has value to at least look at those options. The other option is that internally, with more aggressive, as Mr. Parks was saying, revenue day type activity notions, like for instance, the zoo stays open later at night in the sunny time of year. I don't know what other ideas could come up, but have you thought about that concept, and what's your feeling about alternative strategies internally that could generate enough revenue so that a public-private partnership would have one set of variables, and this would have another set of variables that we could then intelligently decide which makes sense? Just asking you.
That was a big question. John Lewis, General Manager at the zoo. I'm somewhat hindered because I've been counseled not to comment too much on the RFP process for various reasons relative to state laws. So I guess to kind of answer your question, I agree with the concept of let's pick one and investigate it thoroughly versus having three out there on the table, because it's getting a little confusing at the zoo. The other thing I would say is that if we're going to look at the second strategy that you mentioned, that along with that has to come the freedom to act like a business. The zoo already is an enterprise fund, but every time we succeed, we lose that ground. And I understand that currently economics are part of that, and we're all participating. But we have to be allowed to act like a business, because we'll get so far and then suddenly the rug gets pulled and we're stuck again. So I don't know if that answers your question, Councilman, as much as I can.
Wondering, without delaying anything, could we run them parallel and vote on them at the same time, so that it isn't one that goes and then an afterthought of another one going, which would be the internal restructuring or
that's the
revenue stream ideas?
Right, that's the direction we have now, and that's the way we plan to proceed currently.
Mm-hmm. But again, the revenue day is what, Wednesday?
Revenue day is Wednesday.
And this item will be on Friday.
Yes, and just on revenue day, there'll be just
General.
in a general discussion, but the specific item is Friday.
And the issue of, what is that number, 0993, that is actually the RFP? Is that what that CF number is? Or is that the...
Without having it in front of me, but sir, yes, I believe that is the RFP. Oh, wait a minute. If you bear with me, I can check.
I believe that's right.
Any other questions while she's looking that up? Colleagues, what I'd like to do on this, if we could take the two motions that came out of budget, 0600S91 and 92, and put them under the umbrella of 110993, and discuss them all on Friday as part of the larger issue. We might make some headway on that.
You are indeed correct. It is.
I agree.
So if we move, as a committee, we'll move that the two numbers outstanding, the CF numbers 0600-92 and 93, 92 and 91, be placed under the one umbrella of 11-0993, and that it will all be discussed on Friday as part of the larger zoo issue.
Great.
All right, thank you. We'll move that on 9 with that instruction.
Just for clarification, the 11-0093 is already on the Friday regular agenda. At this point, it is too late to add the other two council files on the regular agenda. They could possibly be added on a special agenda, but that would make it some difficulty in addressing all three at one time.
With 9.3 on the agenda, we can't discuss these two budget motions to talk about the revenue at the same time?
In general, the subject matter, I believe, can be discussed, but action can't be taken on these two council files.
We can't meet the Friday requirement?
But you put on the special, action can be taken on as a separate act, right? You just can't do that.
Yeah.
Put them on the special.
So, the city attorney, what do we, seems like, aren't we within sufficient time?
I'm not sure what the clerk's deadlines are. The 72-hour timeline for notice is at 10 o'clock tomorrow for Friday's meeting, but the clerk has her own timelines regarding formatting. So I would suggest you work with the clerk's office to get, if you want it on a regular agenda. Otherwise, it would have to be placed on a special agenda.
If it goes on special, doesn't that limit us from talking about them at the same time?
Correct. Correct.
I believe, I don't have it all right in front of me, but I think 11-0600S91 is pretty much the same as the other. The S92 file is the one that's on the agenda today. So what you could do is have that discussion under the 110993, and then that other sub-file could just be received and filed. Because it can still be, I think, discussed in a general context because it's the same subject matter. This one, you could probably have a general discussion, but not actually take action on this unless it's on a special agenda, and then it would be a separate discussion item. Unless I'm misspeaking here.
One thing I don't understand, if it's Monday, why we can't meet the deadline for Friday?
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
The city clerk's office has an internal deadline of 10 a.m. Monday morning for items for Friday's agenda. I can attempt to call down right now and see if the agenda has been released or not, if you'd like.
I guess it's possible to do a supplemental, but that would have to go through a process, correct?
Please, can they just merge these, and so we can discuss them all on Friday?
Right on. Very good.
Thank you. Next item.
That takes us back to item number 1.
We have, we're going in closed session. Before we go in closed session, we have one card on item 3, and that's is it Roxanne Stern? You come up and speak on item 3. We have items 1 through 4. We'll go in closed session, and after your comments, we'll have to clear the room and do closed session.
Well, I just want to get my licks in one more time.
Okay.
This is about the sidewalks that are in disrepair. It is not about apron parking. And what the cure has been for the city is to remove apron parking, which has put a great burden on the residents in neighborhoods. And I found out that North Village is not the only area that's being affected. I think we have many other pockets where apron parking is being enforced, and is causing a hardship for, I know one person who may have to move because its livelihood is being affected. It's at night. People are driving around looking for parking space. That adds a lot to congestion, and people who are handicapped and live there can't park near their place, so they are at a real big disadvantage. The ADA is, I think, correctly brought into play about regarding the sidewalks. And I have the bruises. I can't show you, but I have bruises from the sidewalk turn I fell last week. The apron parking does not endanger anybody in a wheelchair. It does not harm anybody in a wheelchair. It does not block the way. Anybody can maneuver our streets, our sidewalks, with apron parking. And if they don't, you know what? Ticket them. Off with their heads. Really, it's important to make sure that you're supporting the neighborhoods. And I really, what we have now, because you've stopped it, the ban is in force, is that nothing beneficial has come out of it. People are inconvenienced, people are hurting, because financing, and it hasn't changed at all. Let's fix the sidewalks. Take up a collection. I mean, this is the issue. And if we can just exempt apron parking from this part of the suit, I don't think there'll be any problem. I've talked to one of the lawyers, and they don't have a problem with apron parking. It is there. The city would have to make an adjustment and give us legal permission to do that.
So I'm clear, you're supportive that apron parking should go forward?
I'm sorry.
I just want to make clear what you were saying. You're saying you support apron parking?
I do.
Okay, all right.
I do support it.
All right.
Please support it with me.
All right. I got you. Okay, could we get the announcement for closed session?
The committee may recess into closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 to allow the committee to confer with its legal counsel on the following matters.
Yeah, we'll just do it.
You want to stay here?
Yes.
Session, a quorum, Mr. Weezer, Mr. Englander, Mr. Rosendahl, and myself, Bernard Parks, as the chair. We've addressed all four items in closed session, and on items 1, we will support the city attorney's recommendation of $450,000 from our UB account dealing with the allocations for those two cases, the Lee and the Harrigan case. On item 2, we will support the city attorney's recommendation for, let me find the dollar amount. What is the dollar amount on that one? No, that we're extending the term of the contract to July 21st, 2014.
Correct, and is the committee recommending approval of all the CAO's recommendations for funding? Thank you.
So we adjourn.